properties. As another example, their operations team, so the people responsible for maintaining the servers, they're 200 people. So they're a good definition of a large company. And so what's interesting is that they are launching a lot of Drupal sites. They basically decided to standardize on Drupal for a lot of their smaller sites, where smaller still means they're doing like up to 10 million page views a month. But for them, that's small relative to, say, a CNN kind of style. And it's good because they do this work in partnership with a lot of people in the Drupal community. They've been working with the Lullabots on some of the sites, they've been working with 4Kitchens on some sites, so everybody basically gets a benefit from that because they do need the talent. That's one of their biggest problems, is finding the talent to help them build their sites. So after finding the talent, what I found is the biggest problem that they have is configuration management and code staging, which is something that resonated with pretty much every enterprise that I visited and met. They all have the exact same problem, so we know exactly what we need to fix for those organizations. Here's another example. Actually, last Thursday, only a couple of days ago, I was in New York and I met with the people at the New York Stock Exchange. They just pulled the plug on a very expensive project with a very expensive closed source CMS, and they basically decided to go all Drupal. And so they're in the process of migrating and launching a whole bunch of Drupal sites, and they're trying to hire 50 Drupal people right now to help them manage all of their sites. So I think that's another great example of a large organization adopting Drupal in a big way and standardizing on it as a platform for many of their websites. Here is another site or another company which I met. They're based out of DC, and they specialize in working with the US government, for both at the federal level, at the state level, and at the local government level. And they claim to have 80 Drupal developers. How many people have heard about them? Not many. And they have 80 Drupal developers today, and they have open racks for 80 more. So they're looking to hire another 80 Drupal people. To me, that's sort of a White House of Gov after effect, I think. It's, the government in the US, at least, is adopting Drupal in a big way, and organizations like these are trying to, find the talent. So finding the talent is what this organization struggles with. So, and, again, these are just a few examples, but to me, it really feels like more and more organizations are coming on board. And they all have the same challenges, and I touched upon those, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in this presentation as well. But for now, the point is that Drupal really is invading the enterprise in a way that I haven't seen before, in a very big way. And the reason that's happening is because the technology is actually better. In the past, open source was often adopted because it was cheaper, because there's no license fees. But in this case, in all of the companies that I talked to, they actually choose Drupal because it was a better piece of technology, which is also a very big deal for us, which means we're doing the right thing. So I think Drupal has so much momentum right now that it almost feels like it's pretty unstoppable as sort of a phenomena. And so if you haven't already sensed that, I think you'll sense it this week, hopefully by the end of the conference. And that's just some anecdotal evidence that I just shared with you, but it's actually backed up by other things, like for example, the number of open jobs for Drupal. And Indeed, if you don't know Indeed, they aggregate job postings from a whole bunch of sites, I think from thousands of different sites, and you can see that the number of people looking for Drupal talent is really going through the roof. So that's one thing I talked about in San Francisco, and which I think is starting to come true in a very big way. So the other thing I talked about in San Francisco is that Drupal powers more than 1% of the internet. And so at Acquia, we built a small crawler, and we basically looked at the top 1 million sites according to Alexa, and we found that Drupal represents between 1% and 2%, pretty much. And so obviously that's huge, right? Because 1% of all the websites, it makes for quite a few websites running Drupal. And so then I went on and explained what that also meant. And I said it meant that we're a cockroach, meaning we're hard to kill, but we're not necessarily relevant. So I think we have a choice. We have two choices, and I talked about this at DrupalCon. We can either be the cockroach, we can still have a lot of fun being one, or we can aspire to become something bigger. We can aspire to become a bigger platform for the web, so that is used by even more people. And so that's one of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about. And I think we're uniquely positioned to become that platform. And in the past, I've talked repeatedly about how reach and richness mean success, and that we need to have both. And as you can see from this graph, I think Drupal is in that unique position where we can become that platform, because we do have a fairly big install base, so we have a lot of reach, and we do have a lot of modules and flexibility in the system, so we can have the richness. So that puts us in a great position. Of course, if we do want to get there, we do have a lot of growing to do, as well as a lot of growing up, both on the technology side, but also I think the ecosystem, the way we work as a community, it basically affects us on all different levels. And so with Drupal 7 around the corner and with the redesign around the corner, honestly, I don't think we have a choice to grow up. And so that's, again, what I wanted to talk about in this presentation. But before I start, I wanted to give you a quick update on Drupal 7, because I know a lot of people will want to have the quick update on Drupal 7. So again, in DrupalCon San Francisco, I said, at the time, there is 114 critical bugs. As of yesterday, there's only 20 criticals left. I mean, as you all know, Drupal 7 isn't released, and we need to get that number to 0 before we can make a release. So if we assume all of those bugs are critical, and I don't necessarily think they're all critical, because some of the problems existed in Drupal 6, and so you could debate whether it's actually critical. But if you assume all 20 of them are critical, and we fix them, we can definitely do a release. But the remaining bugs are hard to fix, to be honest. We did a code sprint in Boston last week on Wednesday, and we had about 25 people show up, and we worked for about 8 hours, pretty much full time, and we were able to close 4. So just to give you a sense of how difficult some of these bugs are. And then earlier this week here in Copenhagen, we had another sprint, and I think we had about 40 to 50 people or so working on criticals, that's my guess, and we closed about 10. So that gives you a sense of how much work it will take to close some of the remaining bugs. I have to say that we did make a lot of progress on all of the critical bugs, and I think we might be really close. So there is this website built by Activism Labs, I think it was, called Drupal7releasedate.com, and they basically look at the number of critical